This is a Founding Media podcast.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Packing Taste. Today on the show, we have a very good friend of mine, Chef David Cordúa, who hails from my hometown, so this is definitely going to be a good episode. David is a chef in Houston who studied French culinary art and then took over the Houston scene from, I think it was your family's company or your father's company, and we'll get into that, but you guys started translating South American cuisine for the Houstonians, and it was a total hit. But yeah, thank you for coming on the show, David.
What's up, Axel? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course, man. I'm glad we're both in Austin at the same time and we can sit down and have a little chit-chat. But if you can start by telling us a little bit where your family's from and how the heck you guys got to Houston.
So my family's from Nicaragua. My parents came to Texas to go to Texas A&M, which is actually a popular university in Nicaragua because of agriculture.
A&M is?
Texas A&M, yeah. They have a good-sized Nicaraguan population in their student body. And the revolution started in 1979, towards the end of their junior year, and weren't able to go back home. They got married in Houston in 1980, and I was born a couple years after that. And we haven't been back since. I mean, we spent some summers there, but most of the family's in the United States at this point.
And you're not an only child. You have sisters, right?
I have three younger sisters. Yeah, but yeah, we
you're
were
the oldest.
All born in Houston, all native Houstonians.
Nice. And you guys, I think I always tend to think that every South American family just cooks all the time, but you guys were specifically very involved in the restaurant scene in Nicaragua. Right? Did you guys have a restaurant there?
Yeah, so my dad's uncle had a restaurant called Los Ranchos, which specialized in the Nicaraguan version of churrasco. So churrasco is mostly associated with South America, not Central America. Argentina specifically, with their different cuts of meats and chimichurri. Brazil with their picanha, with big chunks of rock salt and chimichurri on a rotisserie. In Nicaragua, it's a little bit different, and there's a very interesting story of how churrasco got to Nicaragua. They use tenderloin and butterfly it open to kind of mimic the skirt steak that is mostly common in Argentina. So you're taking the most tender cut on the steer, tenderizing even more by butterflying it open, adding more texture to it for chimichurri to adhere, more surface area to hit the grill. So it's a really unique steak that you'll only find in Nicaragua, in Miami because of the large Nicaraguan population, and in Houston because of our family.
Yeah. And so your father came here, and the churrasco, that style, did that kind of inspire your father to open up a restaurant?
So he first went to Miami, and his thought was to franchise Los Ranchos, which had an offshoot in Miami.
Yeah.
And he wasn't crazy about it. He didn't love what they were.
He wasn't crazy of Miami or the restaurant concept?
The restaurant concept and the Miami version of Los Ranchos. So decided to do his own brand in '88. Spent about 2 years in incubation. He was self-taught, and I remember him practicing recipes on us and family and friends for years before we perfected kind of our version, which was the center cut of the tenderloin only, aged at a minimum of 21 days, which tenderizes it even more. And what resulted was something Houston had never seen before. The first customers came in looking for, fajitas, enchiladas, and nachos, and walked out the door. But within a month or two, there was a line around the building, and some incredible write-ups, and that was the beginning of our story.
That was like when you guys were like, okay, there's something here that hasn't been done yet, right?
Right. One of our first slogans was further south than you've ever been before.
Yeah. So of course, our Texas listeners are very familiar with the Mexican food we all have here. And that's South America to a lot of Texans. But Texas being so big and cattle and beef and grilling, I'm sure in the late 80s, early 90s, even the 2000s, people are coming to Churrasco's, which was the first restaurant, right? And having their minds blown with the super tender, juicy steak with an incredible sauce finish. And you're like, this is as good as French cuisine.
This?
Yeah, but like, why hasn't my meat ever tasted like this? So it went from Churrasco's. I'm sure a lot of our listeners know about Churrasco's in the Houston area. And then America's, and what other places were you guys opening up?
So we opened America's in 93, which was Best New Restaurant by Esquire Magazine by John Mariani. Then we opened Amazon Grill, which was our fast casual in 1998. And Artista, which was in the Theater District in Houston. Yeah. In the Hobby Center.
And at what point did you guys have a ton of restaurants open? And how many? Do you remember how many
at our largest, which would have been in 2014, we had 8 locations and a catering division, as well as the catering contract for the Houston Texans.
Okay, and you guys, you weren't. How involved were you at this point? And was it your father who was kind of founding all these restaurants and starting them up?
So I started working in the restaurants when I was 15 as a dishwasher.
They had you hustling.
Yeah, and absolutely hated it. I spent a lot of my late teens and early 20s backpacking. I did Southeast Asia, Europe, and kind of got the cooking bug through travel, and opened the Hotel Valencia from the Valencia Group in San Antonio, in San Jose, California, where I was getting my undergrad degree. That's when I started cooking, and worked in San Francisco, Napa, Sonoma, then did culinary school after that in Paris. And then 2008, moved back to Houston to open the second America's location, and then opened 3 more Churrasco's locations after that, and launched our catering division.
And during that time, was your dad like, hey, come back, come help us out? And you were like, no, I'm going to keep backpacking, and I'm going to stay in San Francisco, and I'm going to keep doing my own thing.
I resisted coming back as long as I could. I definitely wanted to bring something of my own to the table, as opposed to just kind of continuing and repeating what we had already created. The catering division definitely allowed me a lot of room to kind of stretch my legs and try new things that I could incorporate into all the different concepts. So that was really cool, having so many different concepts. That any new idea that I had, there was a place for it.
It's good to have a platform where you can kind of honestly express yourself through what you were doing was food. And having Churrasco's and America's and Amazon, you're right. Like, if you want to do something quick and casual, it's like, oh, I'm going to do this in Amazon, or I want to do something a little bit more fine dining. I'm going to do this in Americas. A lot of opportunity. And Churrasco's and Americas were both South American. Was Amazon Grill South American based?
Yeah.
Or was it?
Yeah, it was very.
I remember going a bunch when I was younger on the one on Kirby, but I don't remember what I'd eat.
So none of our restaurants, and I would say even Churrasco's, are country specific, but it definitely expanded geographically as we continued to grow. So Churrasco's was mostly rooted in our Nicaraguan background, whereas Americas was incorporated, some of Mexico, more of South America, specifically Peru. Amazon Grill, was really kind of street food focused, and had a lot to do with presenting food in a very kind of whimsical, almost carnival fashion. We served cotton candy and tacos in cones.
Okay.
There was tabletop s'mores, and it was a lot about fun and very kid friendly. Artista in the Hobby Center was where I got to incorporate a lot of the different ethnicities in Houston that I grew up eating. So Vietnamese cuisine, Indian cuisine. You'd still sit down and have the plantain chips that were kind of our signature at all of our restaurants. But the cuisine was less ethnically restricted.
Yeah. And so what was at the time, what did all that mean to you? All that food, being around all that food, like when did you know it was like, I want to keep doing this. I want to keep being involved with food. I want to be a creator, a crafter. Was it watching people smile, or was it laughing at people when they try to pronounce a word in Spanish? Like what was driving you? What did the food mean to you, I guess, is what I'm asking.
Well, I think like anything that you're really into and brings you joy, it has to be something that you can't get enough learning about. And food is definitely one of those things. Mm-hmm. You can never stop learning. You can never know it all. There's always a different method, a different technique. I think that's one of the things that I love most about it. I love that it's a universal language. It's something that kind of connects all cultures. I think that's what got me into it in the first place through travel. But there's also a performance aspect to it. I was a musician before I started cooking professionally, and I got a lot of the same satisfaction of that instant gratification that you get from putting something in front of someone and seeing their immediate reaction. Yeah. That satisfaction can be pretty addicting.
Yeah. And that's a good point to kind of gateway into this. So as the listeners know, I do CPG and we do packaged food. And we get so focused on all the little details and like, oh, is our label correct? Is our lid functioning properly? Is our media up to date? That sometimes I feel that I forget about the fact that I'm doing this as an art form, that food is the way I express certain things in my life, my culture, my ethnicity. And with chefs and restaurants, like that's so in the forefront of what they're doing that I try to like remember, like maybe I don't consider myself a chef, but I'm like, Axel, you're a cook. You're expressing yourself with this. And I don't know, that I really appreciate that from chefs. Do you see what I'm saying?
Totally. Yeah. I think it was Anthony Bourdain who said it, and it really resonated with me that, he doesn't call cooking an art form. He calls it a craft. And the distinction that he makes is that an artist has the luxury of waiting to be inspired and to do thing one time. A painter a musician documents something one time and then has residual benefits from doing that thing just that one time. A craftsman, a carpenter, anyone that works with their hands has to do something over and over and over and over again, and it has to be done exactly the same way. So I like the term cooking as a craft a little bit more than
art
being
form.
an art form. There's an artistic element to it in terms of you're combining things that maybe haven't been combined before. There's a lot of room for creativity. You're trying to draw an emotion out of someone.
Yeah, I guess that's why I think art is, because there's a lot of emotion and connectivity with you, the medium, and the consumer, right?
Yeah, at the end of the day, you're trying to move somebody in some way.
Yeah, I mean, you're trying to serve somebody some food, and you want them to be happy, right? You don't want them to not have any emotion. Anyways, yeah, that's.
But it's food. I mean, we can't take it too seriously.
Yeah, and you're not supposed to. You're not supposed to. But it's good to feel like, to remember that I'm sharing something that means something to me, at least, right?
Yeah. Yeah, at the end of the day, what you're doing when you put a plate in front of somebody, when you're creating a dish, you're telling them, "Hey, this is what I'm into right now."
Yeah, it's a very vulnerable thing.
I really dig this. I think you will too.
Yeah. Okay, well, one of the big reasons why I wanted to have you on here, and this kind of came up last minute, but I really want to talk about why grilling is so important here in Texas.
Is it now?
Yeah, one of the things I wanted to talk about. Yeah, the Texas food scene, I don't even know how many cattle we go through, but we eat a lot of meats. Barbecuing is huge here. And I wanted to ask you, why do you think it's so big here? Why do you think every Texan loves barbecue so much? Other than it's amazing, obviously it tastes delicious, but why is it so big in our culture?
I don't know if it's specific to Texas. I think the beef centric barbecue is definitely specific to Texas because of our background, our history with cattle and the cowboy, but the hearth fire smoke, I think, is just kind of in our DNA as human beings, and it's something that we're drawn to. Texas, I mean, when I think of Texas barbecue, it definitely is it's brisket, the first thing that comes to mind. It's our history with worshiping and paying homage to beef, really. But I don't know if that's specific to Texas. I think the grilling overall is just something that's in our DNA as humans.
Yeah, I think I wrote about something like that. I think it, and of course I wasn't even citing anything, but I was saying, yeah, it's in our, like, I'm a geneticist or whatever it's called. Like, yeah, it's in our DNA to grill, to burn things. But we can't say that in, New Yorkers, and don't hate me, but we can't say New Yorkers grill more than Texans, can we? Can we say people from Wisconsin grill more than Texans? I really feel like one of the, other than, the cowboy hats and the horses, when people think of Texans, barbecue is definitely something that pops up. So there is a connection there, and I never really took the time to think about why it's so big here. No,
you're absolutely right. I mean, living in and working in Paris for 2 years, I didn't grill once.
Yeah.
And to be honest, when I moved back, I'm way more comfortable working with a cast iron saute pan over a stove and an oven, and having that level of control. If there's one thing about grilling is that you're dealing with this living element, which are these embers, these coals that are not consistent in heat the entire time. There's a lot more variables. It does bring a lot of challenges that you don't necessarily have with the control of a set stove setting
or a
set
microwave
oven heating. Yeah, the microwave has its place as well.
It does.
Don't knock the microwave. Don't knock
Yeah.
the microwave. But we're talking, but when we're talking about grilling, you're dealing with this other living element that there's adds these variables that aren't there with the controls of a stovetop or an oven.
Yeah. And so you recently did a mini episode on the different cuisines in Houston, right? What was that called?
So it was the Houston Cookbook on PBS, and it really was about highlighting the different cuisines and cultures that are in Houston. I mean, you can eat out every day in Houston, and it's only scratched the surface of what's out there. I mean, it's Ethiopian, Pakistani, Vietnamese, and it's incredible how effortlessly the cuisines like fuse together. There's a great chef called Kaiser Lakshmi at Himalaya, who's doing Pakistani fried chicken. There's a group of Vietnamese buddies that grew up together in A-Leaf that are doing Asian-style Texas barbecue. And it's, the term fusion used to be used back in the 90s and kind of became a bad word among chefs. And in Houston, it really is something that's authentic to us because it's what we grew up eating. And I think that's what we tried to showcase in the Houston Cookbook was, there is something called Houstonese cuisine.
Yeah. The interesting thing is, you're right, that word fusion we tended to use as like, oh, we're not going to go there. It's a fusion restaurant. No. But in...
These are called like fusion confusion.
Yeah, but in Houston, and I think even Dallas and San Antonio and some of the bigger cities in Texas, or even some of the smaller cities, this different culture comes in with their culinary background, and they're meshing in the Texas cooking technique or Texas barbecue or Texas this. And it seems to be working very well for a lot of places. And again, specifically in Houston, there's such a mix of two cultures coming together and putting their food on the same plate. And one of the examples we always talk about is the crawfish.
Yeah.
The Viet Cajun crawfish.
It's the only type of crawfish I eat now.
Yeah. And I think after Anthony Bourdain came to Houston and did an episode about that, the price per pound of Viet Cajun has gone up so much.
The price of crawfish
is
insane now. It used to be $1.50, $2 a pound when I was in high school, and it's like $10 a pound now.
So why do you think Texans are so welcoming to this enmeshment or this fusion of like culinary foods coming together?
When we opened the first America's, the walls of the restaurant were in a 3D pattern of a woven basket, and the symbolism behind it was that instead of being a melting pot, the Americas being a melting pot as it's often called, that we really were more of a basket of all these cultures interwoven together, but with each one retaining its background, its heritage, and its roots. And I think it's a really good metaphor for what Houston is. We're all interwoven together, but still retain our roots. And to answer your question about why Houston, in the late 80s, when we introduced South American cuisine to the city, or Nuevo Latino cuisine, it was very receptive. I don't know if we could have done that in any other city other than Houston. It's so welcoming.
Sorry to interrupt, but did the large Latin American community help, or because I think even like normal like 8th generation Texans were so about that cuisine?
No, to be honest with you, I think we purposely tried not to cater to the Latin American community in Houston. We never tried to be authentic to anything from back home. It really was about creating a new genre, which was South American dishes, South American ingredients with French technique. And that's a large part, as to why I moved to France and got trained there, so I can kind of bring that discipline and apply it not just to South American, but to all the cultures that are in Houston.
Yeah. Why do you think South American food is on a strong come up in Texas, specifically? Like the meats and the grilling techniques, like you mentioned earlier, the picanha, the Brazilian cut, the churrasco, the South American cut. Why is that gaining so much popularity, you think?
Well, I think a large part of the reason why Houston is so diverse is because of the oil and gas industry. We do have a huge Venezuelan population for that reason, a huge Brazilian population for that reason, and they're bringing their cuisine with them. So I mean, that first and foremost, I think, is the reason why you're seeing a lot more churrascarias pop up, because there's just more South Americans in what do they call Katiezuela?
Oh, yes.
I mean,
that's a suburb outside of Houston, Katiezuela. There are a lot of Venezuelans there.
There's a lot of Venezuelans, a lot of Brazilians. I mean, my neighbors throw these huge Brazilian, parties, and they're grilling all day, all night. It does have a lot to do with the petroleum industry.
Yeah, and like you said earlier, I feel like a lot of these people come here and they're cooking, or they'll have friends over, and they're not really doing it for their other Brazilian friends or their other Nicaraguan friends. Like you said, when you were at the restaurant, you guys were like, no, we're going to do something completely new for the people here that are already here. And naturally, that it was so successful, everyone was eating there, right? It just fascinates me how interested Texans are nowadays, to me at least, with different styles of eating meats.
Well, you're a testament to that as well. I mean, 20 years ago, chimichurri was something that people had a hard time pronouncing.
Yeah,
and now you're introducing it into people's homes and in the supermarket. The pickled onions that you do as well, which is something that is eaten with every steak that we have in Nicaragua. You're bringing that to the dinner table in people's homes. So thanks for what you're doing.
Of course, I'm doing it for you guys. No, but it's easy for me to do it because there has been restaurants like yours, or there's been other chefs from South America that come and have put pickled onions on tacos, and people try that and are like, "Wow, this is freaking amazing."
I've always needed this on my taco.
Yeah, exactly.
Where have you been?
And same with chimichurri or churrascos. And I was having barbecue yesterday with my family, and we're sitting down, and they bring the barbecue, and there's a tray of raw onions and another little cup of just pickles. And
Were you missing some acidity?
Well, no, because I had my pickles and I had my onions, and I'm like, this is the same stuff from, I don't know, it wasn't the pickled onions I make. Yeah, it wasn't the acidity I add to my meat, but it's all there. The vinegar was there, the acidity was there, the salt was there, the sauce was there. It's just a different translation, the Texan translation or the Argentine translation.
The first lesson that I remember that my dad, again a self-taught chef, taught me was the concept of the vinaigrette and its application to all foods. So what is a vinaigrette, right? A vinaigrette is 1 part acid, 3 parts fat. You can take that ratio and apply it to any dish that you create, any sauce that you create. There's that magical ratio that makes the mouth happy.
Yeah.
Right? And when you're talking about grilling, you're usually talking about some pretty fatty foods, fatty meat, delicious fat. But you do need that acidity, and that's what you bring with the pickled onions. That's what you bring with the chimichurri, and it's incomplete without it.
I think so.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of other people are realizing that as well. So can you share some I guess support systems or hurdles that you've faced in Texas? We're saying how great and open people are to just eating any type of meat or any type of grill out, but have you seen any pushback from certain styles or certain techniques, or have you seen some things that really are working, some new things that are coming up?
For me, my challenge was, coming into a mature restaurant group that had been around for, over 20 years when I joined. I had a lot of freedom to introduce things that I had experienced in my travels and in my training, but it was breaking them away from, the dishes that they'd come for 20 plus years. I mean, in our kitchen, 50% of our tickets were the churrasco. So I do feel a little bit of a sense of liberation now that I am, creating new restaurants, new brands, new dishes that are a little less ethnically bound and tied to very specific dishes. So excited for this next chapter, and stay tuned.
And yeah, we're going to have to see how our listeners can follow along to see the new concepts coming up. But I guess we have to wrap up soon, but do you have any advice for ethnic food makers, people who are doing these fusion techniques or bringing their traditional food here to Texas? Do you have any advice for them to connect that with Texas residents and Texas folk? Have you seen something work specifically? Do you have to just repeat the word chimichurri over and over again?
I think I would give the same advice to any chef introducing a new cuisine or a new dish. Whatever you do, it has to be something that you are authentically and genuinely into yourself. You can't cook something properly if it's not something that you inherently and deeply love and have to share. It's got to be something that you can't keep to yourself. You absolutely have to try this. This is insane. It has to be authentic. It can't be something that you're trying to replicate from back home, that you're trying to replicate from another cuisine or culture. It has to be something that you are crazy about first.
Yeah, I think one of the themes of this show has been authenticity. I think you're right, being authentic to yourself and what you're doing, maybe that is the best way to introduce new things to people that have never tasted something before.
To me, that's the only authenticity that matters.
Yeah.
I mean, authenticity is a word that's thrown around that, you know, what is it really? The only thing that is authentic is what's authentic to you, and what gets you off, and what can you not share with other people.
Beautiful. And lastly, my question I ask everybody. So on a day-to-day basis, there's things that we have to do, right? So how do you manage what you want to do, which is probably just mess around the kitchen all day and make a bunch of new dishes. So how do you manage what you want to do with what you should do, with what you have to do?
I like to think of it as kind of an axis. First of all, are you into it? Right? Do you like it? Secondly, are you good at it? Because you can really like something and be no good at it.
Yes.
And then lastly, are people willing to pay for it? To me, those are the three most important components. Do you love it? Are you good at it? And does it add value that someone will give their hard-earned dollar for it?
Beautiful. Again, beautiful, beautiful. But I think those are all the questions. I mean, I have a lot more questions, but you know, we got a time here. I think that's a good stopping point. But I want to thank you again for coming on the show. Always love talking to you about food. I think that's the main thing we talk about. But yeah, can people follow you and your next concepts that are coming up on Instagram? Is there a newsletter?
Yeah, you can follow me at David Cordúa on Instagram, and David Michael Cordua Events on Instagram as well. That's our catering and events company. And if you were looking to have an event in Houston, you can find us at dmcordua, Cordua.com.
Beautiful. Yeah, so if you guys want to eat really good food, you know who to hit up now. You're going to slide into those DMs.
And the TV show is the Houston Cookbook, and you can find it on the PBS app.
There you go, guys. You guys have a look at that. Stay tuned what David's going to do next for us Texas folk. And again, thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks, brother.